We are live.
Hi, everyone. This is Bob Pervin with you again. Sorry for the hiccup, which I sort of knew was going to happen. I've been referring to this event as the Aafd's Experiment in Terror. My staff doesn't like me to do that, but it's a scary thing. We've never engaged a technological opportunity to have a virtual meeting. We think we have a great, we've chosen a great partner in Socio Events. We'll be talking about them a little bit more later in the day. But I'm just going to launch back in. By the way, I'm back live again. I'm now on my internet. I turned off my phone and in my studio using my light. And so hopefully all that's good. Quite coincidentally, and I'm going to try to speed up to get us back on schedule because we've lost about 20 minutes. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was the good news, bad news about having a virtual event. It's a great thing in the sense that we're able to explode the ability of people to attend for very little cost. We've been able to open up our program to a much wider audience of members. Most of the Aafd's conferences, as those of you in leadership have known, have always been delegate-based, and all of our chapters are required to send members to our Franchisee Leadership Summit. We invite other associations to participate as well. We come together and we try to move the agenda of franchisee associations forward. This year, sadly, because of a terrible pandemic we've all had to deal with, we've lost the ability to be together. Hopefully that will be short-lived, and next year in 2022 is going to be the Aafd's 30th anniversary, and we expect to have we are contracted and excited to have everybody back together again. If this 4-day experiment works the way we hope it will be, we will also be able to invite a lot of people to come to us virtually. So our goal for next year is to actually be what's called a hybrid event, where most of us, anybody who wants to be with us live can be, but we hope to broadcast this program to a lot of people. But for this particular organization, where we lose the ability for us to connect in person, but Amy is going to be telling you during the course of the event that through Socio platform, it is possible for you to connect with your friends. I know that we're sending out a little tutorial on how to do that. And if time allows, before we move on to the opening session, I'll ask Amy to talk to you a little bit about how that takes place. The beauty of having a virtual event, now that the technology seems to be working, is that our accessibility to great speakers and participation is just widely expanded. Normally, we're not able to bring in senators and congressmen and Federal Trade Commission chairs and whatnot because of the expense of bringing them in and because of their time allotment. But by being virtual, all of that was possible. So we have a very exciting showcase of folks and an opportunity for us all to both learn and to share and to give feedback to our government that are going to be dealing with the Aafd. With that, I'm about to turn over to our program chairs. We are very fortunate to have two guys that had such a great time in 2019. We had to skip 2020 that they re-upped. Being Brian Dillon and Stephen Reimel. You'll hear more about them shortly as well. But before I introduce Stephen and Brian to you, I really would be remiss if, and notwithstanding our trip up of this morning that I'm very sad about, but Amy Mancuso, who is the Aafd's executive director, she has just been a trooper in pulling this together. None of us knew how to run a virtual event. Amy and our Sync meeting management, who's also been just, again, all learning on the fly, or been our meeting managers for the last several years, have found Socio events. Socio is a great platform I hope, notwithstanding any stumbles, that you guys will realize that we have stumbled upon a great platform for us to be able to bring events to you guys. So I really want to acknowledge them. And I also need to acknowledge the lead sponsors. We are blessed by a cadre of sponsors that make it possible for us to bring this event, our events together. And in this particular year, we have 2 sponsors that are our joint co-title sponsors, lead sponsors, if you like, in Ring Central, which is offering a new program called Ring Central for Aafd members. That means that Aafd members get Ring Centrals at a substantial discount. And our other co-sponsor I'm very excited about is a company called Access Retirement Solutions. And they have branded, our newest branded partner, offering something called Aafd PEP retirement plans. And PEP stands for Pooled Employer Plans. It is an incredible new device that's just authorized by federal law at the first of this year. The Aafd was the first association in the country to be able to bring a program to our members, and it is retirement planning on steroids. And you'll learn more about this during the program. But I wanted to acknowledge our 2 lead sponsors and thank them profusely. You'll hear us talking about our sponsors throughout the conference. So with that said, I want to turn over to our program chairs to talk to you about what we're going to be doing over the next 3 or 4 days. Stephen and Brian, take it away.
Thanks, Bob. I'm Brian Dillon, and I just want to welcome you to the 29th Aafd Leadership Summit and Annual Conference. A smart person once told me that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And so what we hope to do here today is give you, and over this program that we've got lined up for you, is to impart a little bit of both of those on you. It's a bit different this year being virtual, but we've really lined up an incredible content with incredible speakers that we think is really going to be beneficial to you individually and to your chapters. Stephen?
Yeah, my name's Stephen Rimo. I want to thank all the franchisees, the attorneys, the sponsors, the exhibitors for taking the time out of their busy schedules to participate in our conference. And in light of the fact that we are emerging from a global pandemic, we would like to extend our condolences to anyone who lost a friend or a family member to COVID-19. Over the next 4 days, we're going to address the whys and how of franchisee associations, and we want to refocus our strategies and tools to achieve a win-win solution for franchising challenges that we face today.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to start off with today is going to be our keynote speaker panel, which will start immediately following this welcome session. We have a panel of 5 distinguished speakers, including Stephen, Bob, and myself, who will present a session on empowering franchise associations. And Bob's going to give you a much more detailed introduction to the speakers after we finish this introduction today. This is going to be followed by our guest luncheon speaker, Senator Cortez Masto, who will outline the hearings that she held and the research her staff performed in preparing her very important Senate report entitled Strategies to Improve the Franchise Model, Preventing Unfair and Deceptive Business Practices.
Yeah, and then later this afternoon, we're going to have the roundtable group discussions with our franchisee legal line attorneys and sponsors on a wide range of topics affecting franchisee associations, including legislative and negotiating strategies and promoting collaborative cultures and much, much more.
Great. And then lastly, what we'll have is the speed networking and sponsors and exhibitors and the Aafd's Market Power Trade Show. And we encourage everyone to attend where you can learn valuable opportunities for the members to leverage their investment in Aafd membership. This is followed by our opening reception, where you can continue to meet with sponsors and other members. We're sorry this year we can't provide drinks and snacks to you, but being virtual, I guess on the plus side, you get to bring your own, and you can probably do it in your sweatpants this year. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Well, I think we
Bring it to me. I
wanted to do. I was going to turn it over to you, Bob, but do we want to do a short lead-in from our sponsor, Ring Central? Is there
Oh,
a
yes,
message?
please.
Okay.
But both sponsors, I think, have.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining Aafd's Franchise Leadership Summit this week. We wish that we could be there to meet you face-to-face and shake your hand, but very thankful for the technology that's allowing us to connect virtually this week. Ring Central is thrilled to attend our very first Aafd Summit and for the opportunity to be a co-lead sponsor for this event. My name is Ashley Maureen, and I'm a Strategic Partnership Manager here at Ring Central, and couldn't be more excited to spread the news of our recent partnership with the Aafd. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Ring Central, we're a cloud-based communications platform equipped with a suite of collaborations tools, including message, video, and phone as some of our modes that we offer. With one unified application, we help businesses consolidate communication across their organization and down to their customers. Communicate through multiple modes on multiple devices so that you can stay connected with your team and customers anytime, anywhere, which is extremely important given our current climate. Unlike many other communication platforms out there, our goal is to bundle all of your communication needs and methods, saving you time and money and helping you consolidate. We are a recent and proud partner of the Aafd and are excited to offer exclusive benefits and cost savings to Aafd members like yourself. Stop by our Ring Central booth for more information on Ring Central and the Aafd member benefits, and come say hello during the Market Power Trade Show. Excited to meet you and looking forward to the week ahead.
Hi, my name's Heath Miller. I'm one of the founders of Access Retirement Solutions. I can't tell you how excited we are to be working with the Aafd. If you haven't heard, the Aafd and Access have joined forces to offer members the opportunity to join a newly launched pooled employer 401k plan. The Aafd PEP retirement plan is powered by Access and makes it easier and more affordable than ever for groups like yours to offer a 401k retirement benefit like never before. In fact, if you don't have a plan currently, you may be eligible for tax credits that in many instances fully offset the subscription fee and most, if not all, of the administrative fees. Plus, whether you have a plan or not currently, Aafd members receive a 10% discount off of the standard subscription fee. So please join us during our live video session on Saturday, June 26th at 11 a.m. Eastern to learn more. Again, we're proud to be an Aafd branded partner and excited to work with you and your employees. Thank you.
Wow. Guys, I have to tell you that what we have learned about Access Retirement and Ring Central, we've now been on the Ring Central platform for ourselves for 4 or 5 months. It's really something that you should investigate. And before I launch into our program, I do want to really not only encourage, but urge all of our members to come to our Market Power Trade Show this afternoon, engage our suppliers. Over the last several weeks, I can't tell you the number of times that people have said, gee, I know I'm a member of whatever chapter I'm in, but what benefits do I get from the Aafd? In fact, just yesterday, a call from a longtime member of our Griswold chapter called me and said, gee, what is this? What is this Aafd stuff that I'm paying money to every month? And has reached out to us to find out what our benefits are. This is your chance. This is your chance to do that. Apologize for that locomotive that just went by. I don't know where it was coming from, but it's my pleasure then to launch into our opening keynote session. We do have an extraordinary panel of folks that are loaded with information to share with you. I'm going to be giving you kind of an overview of who we are and what we do and why empowering franchisee associations are so important. I sort of call my part of the program, you don't know what you don't know, and we'll be launching into that in just a moment. I do want to introduce briefly what's going to happen over the next hour and a half, hour and 10 minutes, I guess it is. I'm going to give you an overview where the Aafd fits into the role of helping your associations thrive and accomplish their goals. But then we're going to drill down to a lot of different aspects, and the panelists that we have all been immersed in their own chapters, their own work, or advising associations. Steve Reimel's going to follow up with me, and he's going to give you a deep dive into what empowerment is and how associations can help you to empower and how to get your associations set up for success. To talk to you a little bit about the difference between franchisee associations and franchise advisory councils, which a lot of our groups come to us and say, we already have an FAC. Why do we need an association? Steve's going to cover that. He's going to be followed by Brian Dillon, who is our active attorney on the panel. I bill myself as a recovering attorney. And Brian will be focused on dealing with pressure points that you will have and the barriers that your association may have to success. Brian will then be followed by J.D. Hayden. J.D. Hayden has themed his program that success comes from within. He's going to be talking about how to successfully leverage the power of your franchisee association to benefit both you, the franchisee, and your franchisor. Jonathan will then, JD will then be followed by Jonathan Fortman, who is another active participating attorney. And Jonathan is primarily a litigator, but he's going to be focused on the way you set your association up to hopefully avoid litigation. And if it becomes inevitable, some practical tips on how you can do that. And then running anchor for our great relay team is, we'll be introducing Zoe Chapin, who is our Chief Administrative Officer at the Aafd, and she's going to be giving you some nuts and bolts about what the Aafd does to support your chapter and how we can get you organized. And then she'll pass back to me for some closing remarks. It was promised that I was going to give you some detailed introduction about each of our speakers, but that's going to happen by each speaker as we turn over, and I'll be telling you a little bit more about Stephen Reimel when I'm done with my part of the program. Amy, leave it right where it is. My theme, as you're seeing on your screen, is you don't know what you don't know. And that is so true of groups that come to us, of franchisees that come to us that have a desire to start a franchisee association and to use the Aafd as your resource to help you to gain that effort. One of the beauties of the Aafd is that we've been doing this for 30 years, and we've supported scores of franchisee associations that many unfortunately have come and gone. Usually when a group forms their association, they have some crisis that they're trying to avert. And very often once the crisis is averted, we unfortunately see groups fall by the wayside. We hope that's not the case. We hope that associations along the way will realize how valuable they are and that there truly is strength in numbers. Go ahead to the next slide, Amy. So I'm going to start a little bit, next slide, or next item. Hit the button one more time, Amy. There you go. I'm going to give you a little bit of a sense of who the Aafd is, and I know all of you are members, or many of you are members of the Aafd, but I think it's useful to understand what our overall mission is. And we are in place, Amy, next, and this is our defined mission, is to define, identify, and promote something we call total quality franchising. And total quality franchising is really no more than a collaborative franchise culture in which the legitimate business needs of both the franchisees and the franchisors are being met. And our goal from the beginning of the Aafd is not to be anti-franchising, not to be anti-franchisor, but to really press for what we call total quality franchising. And franchising the way it was written up on the chalkboard, if you remember what a chalkboard is, the whiteboard, I guess we don't even have those anymore. We're written up in your PowerPoint. But the purpose is to have a brand that is supported by both leadership in the corporate offices and leadership in Main Street, delivering great brands, great benefits, all to the benefit of both the franchisor, the franchisees, and let's not forget their customers. So that's the goal of the Aafd. That's been our mission from day one. Our strategy has always been to be the voice of franchisees, but to be ultimately perceived by your franchisor as an asset of the brand and a vehicle for your shared success. Everything that the Aafd has done, when the fact that we influence legislation is trying to urge franchisors to sit down with their franchisee associations and become more collaborative and negotiating. But along the way, we have learned that our most important tool, the thing that we have done better than anything else, has been to help groups of people that want to form a franchisee association to be effective. So job one at the Aafd, even though I guess you'd say job one is to be the voice of franchisees, but our most important tool to do that is to empower effective franchisee associations, the theme of this particular session. Now, along the way, we're a national trade association that represents several thousand franchisees today and many thousands of franchisees over our 30-year lifespan. So we've been able to pull together programs and services and products which enhance the individual businesses of our members. And over the course of this conference, you're going to have the opportunity to explore what some of those benefits are. Think about it, guys. Your own association, the Aafd, any associations you've done, present buying power, and our ability to, and that buying power should be translated into negotiating leverage with your franchisor, ultimately negotiating leverage with your suppliers, maybe one of our thorniest issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and then ultimately also the ability to take your pennies and nickels and dimes and quarters and put them together into serious money to effectively market your businesses and your brands. Go into the next slide, please. So the question is, how can associations gain empowerment? That's our subject. That's everything we're going to be focused on. And there are many ways that can happen. But keep in mind that there are some fundamental things. The first thing is that you're joining your voice with others. The whole concept of strength in numbers is built into the idea of empowerment. But joining the association does not by itself create your voice. You have to figure out what it is you want your message to be, and to truly join your voice together in some important ways. And once you've done so, you need to figure out a way to engage your franchisor that will cause your franchisor not to cover their eyes, close their ears, and muffle your mouth. You need to be thinking like you treat your customers. Every day of your lives, you're engaging with customers, and I dare to say that not one of you has ever stared a customer square in the eye and say, "I demand you do business with me, and if you don't, I'm going to sue your ass." Excuse my French. No, the first question out of your mouth is, how can I be of service to you? How can I help you? And what we have found is over the time that when our franchisee groups come to their franchisor and say, "Hey, we're here to advance our brand. We consider ourselves to be your biggest asset." We try to urge our members to treat their franchisors to our customers. And to my way of thinking, that is the number one single biggest key to gaining empowerment. Gaining empowerment is having the other guy wanting to eat out of your hand, to deal with you, to work with you. And the faster we can get to that point, without hitting them over the head with a sledgehammer, but to encourage them to do it, that's an important thing for us to accomplish. Having done that, Amy, go to the next. You are going to be pushing for reforms and trying to have demands that you have being satisfied. As the case with most of your engagements with your members, that's a process of negotiation. It's not usually accomplished well by demands or beating the other guy up or over the head, although that can work if you all have your tasers working. But mainly it's to find something that your franchisor wants and to catch your franchisor doing something right and to be useful to your franchisor, and in exchange for the utility that you can gain for them, in exchange for the reforms that you want, to say, gee, I really could accomplish whatever you're asking me for. You want me to bring a new product to line. You want me to be in my offices more. You want us to lower our prices. Well, we could be doing those things if you would do for us some things that we need. And this is all part of the process of gaining the recognition of your franchisor. It's always the biggest and most difficult job that we deal with from very beginning. You want your franchisor to recognize your association. More than recognize it, you want your franchisor to engage your association in important ways. But gaining recognition is a two-way street. Gaining recognition and respect is something that is earned, and you need to demonstrate to your franchisor that you are worthy of their recognition. Sometimes it will come from demands, but most of the time we find that reaching across the aisle and demonstrating value, expressing appreciations for the things that your franchisor has done right, is a much more effective tool to gain that dialogue. For your franchisor to realize, you know what, these guys, these franchisees, they're not our enemy. They are our most valued asset to gain the brand recognition that we want and to be the brand we want to be. And if we can turn that inspiration on for our members and for our franchisors, we're able to gain a lot along the way. Now, having said that, we encourage almost all of our chapters to form a legal fund. We have a whole process to accomplish that. Some of our chapters call the legal fund an investment fund. I actually like that better. But the idea is for your franchisor to be aware of that you have the wherewithal to stand up for your interests and stand up for your rights, and that you'd much rather do it in a collaborative way and in a negotiable way. But if they try to roll over you, that you have the ability to stand up for them. More important than that is that the legal fund it enables you to have the same quality of legal counsel that your franchisor has. Now, I want to stress, we got ahead of me a little bit because we're going to talk about litigation in just a minute. But most attorneys are not litigators. Most attorneys are what we call solicitors. They are engaged in negotiation, writing contracts, and advising you of your rights and trying to help you get to there. Litigation, as you're going to hear from Jonathan Fortman a little bit later, is a last resort. But knowing that you have the same quality of counsel and being advised by that counsel along the way is a huge tool. Now, each of you bought a franchise. You hopefully took your franchise agreement to an attorney. You probably choked on the $2,000 he charged to review your franchise agreement, which was nowhere near enough money to be able to actually sit down with your franchisor, nor does he have the leverage on a one-on-one situation. But representing an association suddenly that is backed by a substantial legal fund, suddenly you're capable of having the same quality of legal counsel that your franchisor has, and their threat of litigation is a frightful one, because if they know you can engage in litigation, they can't roll over you, and that they're much more likely to say, hey guys, we can talk. Now, having said that, sometimes litigation is the last resort. Again, I like to think of litigation as the backstop. I'd like to think of your association as desiring to anything but litigation as a last resort. But should you need litigation, should you be mistreated by a franchisor, should they be making you use a supplier that is not well chosen and is way too expensive because of the abuse of the supply chain, which for me is the number one biggest and most egregious abuse in the franchising world. Sometimes you're going to need to head to court, and having a legal fund behind you and having strong counsel behind you makes it possible for you to stand your ground and actually gain the kind of victories that we want to have. So if you go to the next slide, you're going to see what our theme is empowering franchisee associations. Well, what do we mean by that? Our goal for you all this week is to encourage your association to take charge. It's all about building the livelihoods of your businesses and building your franchisees, but to do it on a collaborative basis. This is a great slide. I don't know where Zoe found it, but we're really trying to put the puzzle the puzzle together and to make your association, your light bulb, be as bright as it can be. And with that, I'm going to be able to show you the smiling face of Mr. Stephen Reimel, if we go one more. And I want to tell you a little bit about Stephen. He's provided me with his bio, but I will tell you that Stephen has been a superstar within the Aafd. He is one of the founding members. He's a franchisee of the Griswold Home Care franchise system. He's one of the founding members of the Griswold Franchisee Association, the GHCFA, a past president of the association and past officer, but he's been there from the beginning. He's been a trustee of both their general legal fund and also a legal fund of their New Jersey offices. All our legal funds have a potential to have sub-funds built in there. He's been a leader within the Aafd. He's been a thought leader. I won't hold it against him that he's also a practicing attorney, but the other part of his life is taking care of our seniors, and Stephen does a great job with that. But he has also been an ace at supporting franchisee associations. So Stephen, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Bob, for that generous introduction. I too identify myself as a recovering attorney, just as you do. But let me talk about empowerment. Empowerment generically is just a process, and I say process because we've been at it and our association has been at it for over 10 years, and it takes time to develop an effective franchisee association. And of course, what we're trying to do is to claim our own rights. Now, in the next slide, we're going to take a deeper dive into empowerment and how it affects or how it relates to franchisee associations. So we're creating, you're actually creating something from nothing, from scratch. You're creating a franchisee association, and you're trying to develop a sense of autonomy. A franchisee association is independent of the franchisor. It's self-governing. You set up your own bylaws, and you have your own funds. We're also trying to develop a sense of confidence to act collectively. As Bob said, there's power in numbers. You need to reach out to all of your franchisees in your system to try and get them to join as members. And we're trying to change the relationship between you and your franchisor. The franchisor has all the power in the sense that they have financing, they have private equity, they have a great lobbying institution, which is the IFA, the International Franchise Association. And we're trying to change the institution of franchising. You're going to hear from other speakers from Congress and the FTC on the things that they're doing to try and improve franchising, protect franchisees. So the next slide, I'm going to show you some recent empowerment movements. Now, I'm not suggesting that the problems that franchisees face rise to the same level as these social movements. But I do want to point out the success of these movements have been because they're grassroots. And we as franchisees, we need to take charge as well. If everyone's going to help us, if Congress is going to help us and the FTC is going to help us, we need to step up and claim our own rights. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we have what I call the three L's of Z empowerment. The first is learning. We need to educate franchisees about franchising, the business of franchising. There's more that goes on behind the scenes with private equity, how to negotiate a franchise agreement, how to buy and sell a franchise, and how to have an exit strategy. The franchise. You also have to learn about your franchise agreement. You need to learn what the terms and conditions are in your agreement, what they all mean, and what your rights and obligations are, as well as the rights and obligations of the franchisor. So the second L is labor. A successful franchisee association requires a lot of time and effort by dedicated and committed franchisees. We meet every month for our monthly board of directors call. We've been doing this for 10 years. And there are times during the day when you are so busy that you just don't have the time to join a call, but you have to do it in order to maintain that momentum going forward. And the last L is leadership. We're trying to mold franchisees into leadership positions to assume greater responsibilities. In order for a franchisee association to grow, you have to attract new franchisees and better leaders in order to maintain your association. Now, the next slide, in my research, I found an article that suggested that franchisors can empower franchisees. They can help the franchisee to find their purpose, their vocation, what they're really trying to achieve with their franchise. They need to have open and honest lines of communication with their franchisees, and they need to know the difference between a leader and a manager. Leaders lead, managers manage, and the franchisor needs to identify who the leaders are in that franchise and work with them. And the franchisor can support your franchisees and offer them opportunities. In our system, we have working groups, where franchisees get to work shoulder to shoulder with members of the executive committee and sometimes the CEO himself on several issues involving things like marketing, software, IT development, those kinds of things. So I'd like to take a poll. I hope we can do this. Does your franchisor empower you? So I'd like to see if we can get the results. It should be on your screen. There should be a section where you can go to poll. I hope everybody can find it.
So this is Amy from the Aafd, just checking in. So if you are on your screen, you should see chat on the right-hand side, and then you should see a polling option. And if you click on the polling option on the right-hand side, it is a live poll and we can see instant results.
Well, Amy's doing that. Why don't I just move on a little bit? And we'll give people time to register their responses.
Mm-hmm.
So how do associations gain internal empowerment? Well, again, it's education. You're educating new franchisees on your franchise agreement, on your culture, and how the franchisor interprets and applies your franchise agreement. You also can build franchisee benefits. In our case, we have best practices calls on a monthly basis where the franchisees share their successes and even their failures for new franchisees to learn. And you have the power of group purchasing. And the power of group purchasing is a great tool. A lot of franchisee associations who have been successful were able to negotiate purchasing agreements with suppliers that benefited the entire system. So the power of group purchasing is a great tool. So now, next slide, how does the Aafd empower franchisee associations? Well, they provide the legal framework for you to operate. You don't have to hire an attorney to form a 501c3 not-for-profit association. You're under the umbrella of the Aafd. You also have lobbying activities. Heath Miller, who is the Director of Public Affairs for the Aafd, he's going to speak later on in this our presentation, not this presentation, I'm sorry, in the conference, about his activities and how he is helping franchisees with his lobbying activities. And then you have franchise training. And there I put the legal line with the attorneys. Every member of the Aafd has the opportunity to spend 30 minutes with a legal line attorney on the issue that's pressing you or an issue that you're concerned about. And then you have mentoring opportunities. I've had the opportunity to meet with other franchisee associations and give them the benefit of our experience. And I believe J.D. Hayden is going to speak to that later on in this presentation. And then you have administrative support. You have a great team. Amy has her great team with Zoe. Our coordinator is Lori. And they help us set up all the conferences and the calls and the meetings and the notes and the agendas. They're a great source for us. And then you have the legal trust fund. And I want to reemphasize what Bob said about the legal trust fund. When we formed our association, the first thing we did was to create a legal trust fund. It was very controversial. A lot of the franchisees considered that thought that we were trying to create a war chest to sue the franchisor. And it took us several years to convince people that's not what the intent is of the legal fund trust. In our case, we're a highly regulated business. We're in home care. And so we use our legal fund trust initially to retain counsel, to give us advice on regulatory matters, to make sure we're in compliance. And then later on, we had the opportunity to negotiate a franchise agreement with our franchisor. And then we use those funds at that time to retain counsel to negotiate a new franchise agreement. And in our case, we retained Bob Pervin. And it took us 16 months of dedicated time and effort going through the franchise agreement line by line. But we came out with an award-winning franchise agreement. So the legal trust fund is a great tool just for you to empower your own association. So the next slide. So if I asked every franchisee, what business are you in? And some people would say, oh, in my case, I'm in home care. Other people may say that they operate a gym or they run a tax service. But the common denominator for all this is that we're in the business of franchising. The minute any franchisee signed a franchise agreement, you're in the business of franchising. Next slide, please. One of the hardest problems that faces franchisee associations is recruitment of members. So you need to form a membership committee. It doesn't have to be, it can only be 1 or 2 members of the board, but they're reaching out to the other franchisees to try and get them to join. You need to have that peer-to-peer contact, face-to-face contact. You can do it over the phone. You can do it by in-person meetings. We were very fortunate in our association. Our first president was very extroverted, and she did a great job meeting with every franchisee or calling them. And we had also call lists for the board of directors to call various franchisees as well. And then you might want to invite these recruits to a group conference call. Amy has helped us in the past set up a recruitment call with franchisees. And also you may want to invite them to a board of directors call because you want to show them what the business really is of the franchisee association. So how do you build a successful board of directors? Well, there again, you need to form a nomination committee. And again, 1 or 2 people, and they're identifying or soliciting franchisees to nominate themselves as leaders. The other thing you can do is to have other franchisees can identify leaders at your annual conferences and suggest them to become a leader on the board of directors. And then you want to lay out a succession plan. And it's pretty straightforward, but it's important that you fill all the positions, the slate of officers: president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and of course you have your coordinator. So after the first term or so, it could be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. The vice president assumes the role of the president, the secretary moves up to vice president, and the treasurer, well, in our case, the treasurer stayed the same. He liked being treasurer. So, and then you have the nominations committee suggesting new officers, and you recycle those positions. In our case, for the first, probably for the first 3 years, I was president. I moved to secretary, and we just recycle back and forth. Some of us have been president 2 or 3 times until we get enough new leaders to join the board of directors. So mistakes to avoid. This is a little bit of a busy slide, but let me see if I can just summarize it relatively quickly here. The first thing, as I said there, is to form a full cadre of officers to create a succession plan. You don't want to start out with 1 or 2 people. You're just going to run out of bandwidth and you're going to lack momentum to go forward. And you want to organize to defend the members of your franchisee association. I know a lot of franchisee associations form because they're having problems with the franchisor. But you don't want to organize to sue the franchisor. You want to defend your members, and you're defending them from everybody. And like I said, in our case, we are highly regulated. In some cases, we're defending our members against the regulators who come against our industry. You want to collaborate with the franchisor. You don't want to be the loyal opposition to everything the franchisor wants to do. You want to be part of the solution. You don't want to be part of the problem. And you can align your mission and goals of the franchisee association with that of the franchisor. If he wants to win an award, then you want to win an award. And you want to demonstrate value to the franchisor. Always be professional. I know board of directors calls can sometimes be contentious. You don't want to take cheap shots. You want to set an agenda, so you follow an agenda. You want to respect people's time. If you set it for 30 minutes, you do it for 30 minutes. If you set it for an hour, you end at an hour. But you want to have an agenda, and you want to address problems. You want to face your problems, and you want to come up with solutions for those problems. And you want to advertise the successes that you enjoy. Bob mentioned about the FDD being identified in the FDD. That's a big deal for recruitment in your association. So you want to advertise that to all the franchisees in the system and take credit for getting that done. The next slide, please. We're going to talk about the FAC. The Franchise Advisory Council, it's set up by the franchisor. They set the schedule, they set the agenda, they keep the minutes, and basically the franchisees are there in an advisory capacity. Truth be told, this is my first year on the FAC, and the difference in the calls on the FAC and the association is independent. We have a lot of calls where we're just dealing with real problems and trying to come up with solutions. But the association is independent. We set our own schedule. We set our own agenda. We have our own funds that we can retain counsel for advice. And it's just that the association has a greater bargaining power to work with the franchisor. The FAC just tends not to have that ability to address problems with the franchisor. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Brian. Brian's a partner with Ligarius, Napel, and Dillon, a nationally recognized law firm, and they specialize in representing franchisees and franchisee associations. He's represented some of the largest franchisee associations in the country, down to a single unit franchise and sole proprietorships, but only franchisees, never franchisors. So Brian's going to discuss some of the more common pressure points or challenges facing newly formed associations and how to recognize them and how to best handle them. So Brian, take it away.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to move to the first slide here. I'm going to talk about basically pressure points and challenges that are facing new franchisee associations and how to overcome them. Probably the biggest is often the fear of retaliation from your franchisor. And this is a real concern. There's the fear of termination of the franchise. It can be for cause. Sometimes it can be without cause. It can just be the franchisor taking a shot at you. It can also be incurring penalties for non-compliance, failure to comply with your franchise agreement, all the way to the end of your agreement, which you could be non-renewed. So these are real concerns and fears that many members will have going into this, and shouldn't be taken lightly. So you want to try to mitigate these risks. One way that you can do that is the individuals. You want to clean up your act. You want to make sure you've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's. So yeah, you need your members to get out there and fix any kind of defaults they've got. If it comes to a non-renewal, one of the things that I run into quite frequently with my clients is that they often haven't given their franchisor written notice that they intend to renew. And almost every franchise agreement has a requirement in there that you're required to give, maybe 180 days or 90 days notice to your franchisor in writing that you intend to renew. And if you've just failed to do that, you've opened yourself up to the possibility that, as retaliation, your franchisor might choose to not renew you. So you want to make sure you've cleaned up all these things and not given the franchisor the opportunity to focus on those, because from a group perspective, what you're trying to do is keep the franchisor focused on your problems that the group's trying to solve. So you don't want the franchisor to be able to shift that focus onto, not renewing franchisees or retaliating against franchisees by terminating them. So the more you can remove those possibilities, the easier it will be to keep the focus on what you're trying to achieve as a group and fixing your problems. It can also be somewhere in the middle and not as extreme as termination or something like that. You may be in a system where you've got platinum, gold, silver, bronze recognitions. You might risk losing that entitlement. Loss of special treatment, secret perks and deals. It's not unusual for franchisees to have negotiated better royalty terms for a certain period, or reduction in your ad fees or something like that. So you want to make sure you're not putting any of those things at risk. And it can be as simple as harm to relationships, both with other franchisees or your franchisor. Fear of being labeled a troublemaker, loss of support by your peers. The friendships, it's not unusual for franchisees to be friends with their franchisor, or just other franchisees. And, you just want to identify these issues and make sure what you're doing is taking steps to avoid, deteriorating these types of friendships and things like that. The next one would be internal conflicts. One of the challenges when you're starting out, and Stephen went into this a little bit, explaining things you do about getting members, but finding the right members is really key. And, the biggest focus you really need to have is getting committed leaders who are going to take this association on and really push your agenda and really push to resolve your issues with the franchisee or franchisor. In any case, though, you're going to have problem members. And we'll talk about them a little more, but you're going to have what we call tattletales or moles. Anything you say in your meetings is very likely to get back to the franchisor because they'll have somebody in there that's going to tell them about it. You've got hotheads, people who might risk blowing up whatever your agenda is. You've got ostriches, people who really are sticking their heads in the sand and don't want to admit that there's a problem. And lastly, you've got nervous Nellies, I'd call them, that literally, they're too scared to join your association, and they're really afraid to come on board and give you the support you need. So we're going to talk a little bit about dealing with them later, but in the next slide, I want to talk to you about the common mistakes that you want to avoid when you're a new franchise association. And probably the biggest one is this just initial reaction to sue your franchisor and jump right into litigation. You've identified a problem, you're trying to fix it, and often the first thing people think of is, well, we need a big stick to make the franchisor do what we want to do. And I think, as Bob has talked about earlier, that's more often than not the wrong way to approach this. The last thing you really want to do is to try and make life difficult for your franchisor. You're not trying to create a hostile relationship here. What you're really trying to do is create a collaboration, and treat your franchisor as if they're a customer. You can get much further in most cases by creating a good environment and a working relationship with your franchisor than starting it out, especially with a hostile relationship. So next, the problem you have, though, is you still got a problem with your franchisor. So you need to deal with it. And, there's a couple ways you can approach this. One way you might approach this is what I would call the Lone Ranger style, where just one or two of you may go to the franchisor and try to work something out. There's reasons why this may work better. You can identify the problem, you're going at it alone, but you can bring with it somewhat of a stealth where it's not becoming a bigger issue maybe than it should. And sometimes this is the best way to deal with it. If there's an issue out there that the franchisor doesn't really want to get out, doesn't want to make into something really big, sometimes approaching it just with one or two of you can really be an effective tool to do that. Now, more often than not, that's not the way you'll approach these. Probably the most common way this is done is what we would call a posse effect, where you really are joining forces and getting everybody together and on board, because this is what really, in most cases, gives you the credibility with your franchisor and the leverage you really need to push the franchisor in the direction you're trying to push them. Because, one or two voices, may go unheard. Whereas, if you've got the entire system or a good portion of it, it's really hard to ignore you. Now, the downside to this is this can be like herding cats. It's really difficult. If you've got 100 members, they may have 100 different ideas about what's the problem and how to fix it. So, there's a downside to this, but you need to really address that and try to work through it, because typically the posse approach is going to be how you can best get your issues in front of the franchisor and dealt with. Next slide. So really what you want to do is you start out trying to get your committed members and leaders, and commitment is really such a key to this. And identify your leaders, arrange your initial meeting, identify the issues, and really try to bring everything into focus. And, I think one of the best ways to approach this is to kind of begin with the end in mind. What are you looking for? Is this a divorce? Are you going to fix the marriage? How do you get there? And, almost always with an association, you're going to be trying to fix the marriage. It's very unusual that the association is pushing for divorce. that typically is with one or two members or, individuals that are trying to get out of the system. But to get there, as both Bob and Stephen have mentioned, one of the biggest, avenues to really get there is by creating a legal fund, because that's what's going to give you the wherewithal to really approach us. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But now I want to talk about the individual members and kind of problems you have with them and how to identify them. So, the first one's kind of tattletales and moles. And, we all expect this. You're going to have them no matter what you do. But why avoid them? Well, because they do bring the potential for retaliation. You're trying to keep things secret in a lot of cases. And if you've got somebody in there who's taking everything you say back to the franchisor, now they know who's saying it, what's being said, and it can open up the door for the franchisor to start picking you off and retaliating. So you try to avoid them as best you can. So who are these likely tattletales, and what do you look out for? Often it's a failing franchisee. It could be members of the FAC, especially if co-opted, franchisees out of compliance, friends of the franchisor, quality control inspectors. A lot of times, it's not unusual for former employees to be franchisees, and they've got a close relationship with the franchisor. So if they become a member of your association, you have to expect that they're probably sending everything back to the franchisor. You've got natural gossips, just people who like to talk. I mean, there's all across the board, but kind of the strategies for avoiding these tattletales is, you start by contacting the most bulletproof franchisees, those who really don't have anything to lose. And these should be your leaders. You want the bigger franchisees, the ones that are, have the most revenue, the most, are really bringing in everything for the franchisor. Because, if you've got 30 units, it's much less likely that the franchisor can retaliate against you, because then it becomes, cutting off the nose to spite their face at that point. But sound them out, find out who these people are that can really avoid this kind of being put into the position where they feel like it's necessary to tell everything to the franchisor, because you do want to keep kind of a secrecy amongst your, especially your steering committee, where, things won't get out if you don't want them to. On the other hand, you really have to accept that you're going to get them. So accept them and use them. If you want to get information back to the franchisor, especially about your legal fund, one of the best ways to get information of your legal fund to the franchisor is to let the mole tell them. It's much more effective if their mole's telling them that, hey, you've got all this money, than you beating them over the head. Then it becomes much more confrontational. So the next group I would call hotheads, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The dangers here are they may confront your franchisor before you're ready. This can screw up your whole, strategy. They may start litigation on their own. Often they post grievances on the internet, on blogs, things like that. And, if that's infuriating your franchisor and you don't want it to, then, that's really a potential for screwing up your entire strategy. So, you want to try to avoid hotheads, especially. And some of the responses you can give to them is, look, individual action is weak. It may prompt franchisor retaliation. And explain to them there's real strength in group action. Probably one of the most effective ways that I think is, the group can better finance it. If a hothead's going at it by themselves, they're on their own for the cost too. So, letting them know that this is going to cost them a lot less if they follow along with you and use your strategy can really help. So next slide. The next one would be ostriches. And again, that's pretty self-explanatory. They're in denial or refusal. They don't think the problem affects them. But you still want to try and bring these people on board. One of the responses you can give to them is, look, it can happen to you. Let them know you're trying to help the system, not hurt the system. And you bring protection. You've got strength in numbers. When all of you are in this together, it's much harder to focus on any one franchisee. So next slide. Okay, and lastly, we have what I call the Nervous Nellies. And, they're the ones that are in fear of retaliation. And this fear isn't made up. It's real. There's a chance of termination or non-renewal or loss of your benefits. So it's a rational fear to have, but you really want to try and get people over this fear and bring them in. Sometimes the fear is the cost. It can be over dues or the legal fund. Usually dues, especially with the way Aafd sets up their dues structure, that's not a huge cost and not as much of a concern. But the legal fund, when somebody hears legal fund and we're going to spend all this money on lawyers, often that's a very scary proposition. So you got to explain to them how the legal fund really works. The legal fund is not necessarily a fund you're going to put all that money into. Typically, the way Aafd has set up legal funds is, sometimes you'll put in some money to get it seeded and started, but in the most cases, what you're doing is just getting commitments from members to actually pay into it. So, you might get a member to commit $1,000, $5,000, or $10,000 over the next year or 10 years or however long. But you're not requiring them to pay it in. But what you are doing is you've gotten that commitment. And once you've got that commitment, now that gets back to the franchisor. And, you may not have put all this money in, but they're going to find out you've got a commitment of over, $500,000 or something to fund your legal fund. So it's a very effective tool. And, if you explain it correctly, often that will get a nervous Nelly over the fear of the cost. Because the other thing you want to do to regarding the fund and costs and things like that is explain it's a return on investment. You may be putting in $1,000 or $10,000 even, but the whole idea here is that if you put in $1,000, we're expecting to save $2,000. So you're going to get a net benefit out of this in the long run. Let them know there's protection by strength in numbers. You don't have to identify your members. Membership is protected by privacy. So, if you don't want to tell the franchisor who's in your association, you don't have to tell them. Let them know their worst fears may come true anyway. What's happened to others can happen to them. So, all these are ways that you can hopefully get through to the, person who's a little fearful of coming on board, because you still need that group and all these people to come help you. Now that's kind of a generality and overview of some of the issues. I think some of the most key ones that you'll probably face as a new association. Thank you for letting me talk about it. Next up, we've got John Hayden, and John is JD is an expense reduction analyst and member of the Expense Reduction Analyst Franchise Association, Owners Association. Following a career with the U.S. Navy, JD went to work in the private sector with the American Express and then later IBM in those roles. He developed and led efforts to help business partners leverage technology to reduce costs and increase process efficiency. Since 2005, he has had his own consulting business in South Florida, and he's delivered over 250 successful projects in 17 different expense areas, with a savings of well over $10 million for his clients. In 2008, JD was honored as a member of the inaugural President's Circle Award, identifying him as one of the top ERA consultants in the United States. He was also recognized as the 2010 Consultant of the Year for the Southern Florida area. And now he's going to discuss taking the discussion inwards to the individual association members, and discussing activities to create value for the members now and in the long term to support the association strategy to achieve and retain relevance with the franchisor. So, JD?
Sorry. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Brian. I tell us success comes from within, because one of the big focuses we've had in our franchise association, has been discussed a lot with the Aafd, is that while the crucible that forms most association is conflict of franchisor, there's so much more that you can do with that. And that's one of the things we've been trying to do inside of our association. It's not just about, I'm sorry, something popped up in the chat. There are so many things we can do for the franchisees in the association members, to help them in growing their businesses, as well as dealing with any perceived issues with the franchisor. Next slide. Many of you have probably seen the Simon Sinek. What the heck is it? They're the TED Talks, and he talks about starting with why. And we've actually sat down and kind of gone to that core over the last 6-8 months inside of our board to go back and look at what our mission statement is. What do we want to do? We're not just here to fight with the franchisor. What we do is we want to have a seat at the table, and that comes eventually because they're very resistant to that. But there are so many other things we can do in between to help the members and help everyone grow their businesses. And we all do better when we all work together. A few examples here of different types of things I'll talk about here. Next slide. Part of it is coming up with that focus that all roads lead to the franchisee. All the association members in your Franchise Owners Association are really what it's all focused on. One of the things, the new president, I'm the former past president, I think he's done a good job of, we didn't really organize what we knew what the big 2 or 3 were, but there are a lot of other things we'd like to address, and some are connected. So we've put together that issue list, and also a wish list, things we wish the franchisor could do, maybe we could do internally and that sort of thing. We're really careful about it, being strategic with some of those items, and what are those other ideas that are more individual activities that the FOA can do, either by members setting up committees and things like that. And we're also careful to include things that will maybe have a greater benefit for the ZOR, but they all work for us. And just because they got a little bit bigger win here, that will probably lead to us getting better wins down the road. Next slide. So, sorry about it. Lost my place. One of the key things, raise your voice. Once we come up with that list, we want to make sure we're regularly communicating it out to all of our members and also prospective members, because the newer franchisees may have different issues than the ones that have been in. There may be others that look at it and say, why should I join? I don't see a whole lot there. And that's going to give them those reasons, and also will help you to, in sales, I learned years ago about the radio station WIFM. What's in it for me? What you find out is we set up a membership committee, and it's about addressing those individual things with the different members, talking about specific things. And by having that issue list, it's helping us do it a whole lot better. And the more things we communicate across our franchisee network, we can leverage those moles and have them put it out there, because the more we talk, the louder our voice is, and it becomes more difficult for the franchisor to ignore us. And one of the other things is to catch the franchisor doing something good. It may not be exactly what you wanted, but if there are some things that the franchisor has done that are part of the way, that's still a win, because classic negotiation is acknowledge those wins, give them a stroke. Everyone likes them. And an example of that I heard about was with the franchise Oil Can Henry. They were exclusively castor oil. This was a while back, and it was quite expensive. And they were getting Jiffy Lube, and some of the others were taking their lunch money because they offered lower value oils as an oil change option. And one of the things the franchisor did was bring in a lower cost alternative. Franchisees weren't really pleased because the quality was a little bit lower than what they really wanted. But that was something good to catch them at. And then you can start to build on it from there. Take those little wins and you can build on it. Next slide. Getting the seat at the adult table. That's what we all want. We talk about this a lot in our board of directors meeting. It's really the most important thing. And it's really helpful. Franchisors see it as a threat in many cases. It gets advertised as a threat. I know from lots of folks I spoke to that franchisor association, the IFA, is dead set against it because it gives us leverage. But if you have a good franchise organization, it can only help. And one of the things this can do is to increase oversight on a lot of the different systems changes, because sometimes franchisors don't do everything right. Also, shared legal counsel for the group. If you got a fight, well, it's better to be all in, as Brian was mentioning earlier. But also there's individual things like reviewing the FDD, because as renewals come around, some franchisors are requiring you sign the new agreement. What are the differences? And helping to develop what kind of side letters we want to get to change that. And it gives an ROI and growth opportunities for each of the franchisees. And the AAFD accreditation is a great thing. Not many franchisors take advantage of it. But it also, I'll talk about that in a minute, but it might be an opportunity for franchisors and something to bring up down the line. Next slide. What we really want to do is have an impact on all those different threads. And that's part of what that issue register, that opportunity register is all about. Because you want to be able to provide that input to the franchisor to get better stuff out in the marketplace, to better grow our businesses and make more money. And the reality is that the vast majority, I'm pretty sure, are all based on a royalty structure. So selling more means they make more money as well. One of the good things Griswold has done and they're really held up as a poster child, and I think for many good reasons they are. They, in their franchise agreement, all the significant changes are now required to be discussed. It's, our franchisors sometimes, they still make stupid choices, and they do it in a very heavy-handed way, and they don't make good business sense from the franchisee perspective, and they're hard to implement. Something like that with Griswold is something that we definitely would love to have. And we want to build that collaborative type of thing. Influence on franchise-wide systems. There have been several very, actually, names everyone knows. Meineke Mufflers. They wanted to move from just mufflers to auto care to compete better. What they were able to do was wrap that into another place where the franchisor was behaving badly and get a brand new, much better franchise agreement put in place, a better, more realistic structure. At the same time, Meineke got what they wanted. They wanted to go out into more areas of auto care to drive revenues. They just didn't make a lot of sense for franchisees under the old agreements. A name probably everyone here knows, Tupperware. They wanted to move away from party sales to retail and online, and everyone was up in arms. What do you mean? No more Tupperware parties? And that wasn't really what it was. But by having that large franchise group of all those franchise owners and starting to have that conversation and negotiating that, they found a better way to actually do that, which the franchisor wanted. It was better for the franchisees, but it also created a better revenue sharing opportunity for the Tupperware franchisees. So they were making a better share of the revenues, and everyone gets to win. And it's just a great way to, what do I want to say, to add to everyone's revenue stream. One more thing I want to talk. All right, we're ready to rumble. Let's move on. We talked about the Meineke piece. Sylvan Training is another example where, they didn't want to move to ebooks for whatever reason. The franchisees saw it as a bad type of thing. This is a chance for all of us to share together and kind of bring the franchisor to the table to negotiate a better agreement, better type of organization. The shared legal counsel benefits in that way as well, because we can work for individuals. We have an attorney that reviews the FDD every year and provides good suggestions for that. They can be leveraged for individual disputes with the franchisor, but also when you have the same attorney who's reviewing these FDDs and you get them involved in negotiations for changes, they know what other franchisees have gotten in the past. So there may be non-disclosures that are exchanged and that sort of thing. That's one way to get around that, to make sure everyone's getting the best deal that they can get. And Aafd provides a lot of support about creating that legal fund. It is the last resort. Going to court, everyone loses. And it was obvious after it was said to me, at first I pushed back, was that at the end of the day, we pay for the franchisor's legal fees and ours, because our royalties are supporting their legal battle. So at the end of the day, much like they say, the only ones who benefit in divorce are the attorneys. It's really the same in this kind of law. You need them. Don't get me wrong. You want to get in a fight. You don't want to take a knife to a gunfight. But it's super important. Move on to the next slide. We talked about it before. Having a volume for all of those new ideas, whether they come from the franchisees or the franchisor. They don't make great decisions all the time. We had what started our franchise association was a huge fight with the franchisor. We had a new global operations guy who had decided that this is how it was going to be. And just every Sunday evening at about 8 o'clock, he would send out an email about the next change. And there were some that just absolutely were abhorrent from a business perspective. And what we did was we started looking at this where there were several people who were very loud about it. And Brian had talked about that before. Some of the hotheads weren't necessarily hotheads, but they were certainly the loud voices in the group. And then all of a sudden we saw they started getting picked on. And it became very obvious that we needed to do this as a consolidated group so we could push it out there. Fortunately, the operations guy retired at the end of last year, and things have been getting better in some ways, and we're still working at it. We don't have the seat at the table yet, but we're still working at it. And some of the other things about having shared infrastructure, we've talked about some of those things. It's about having a lot of different systems in place. Sometimes the franchisor will not allow, they say, we don't want to do that. No, it's not worth it. Well, the association can do it. And that has one of those opportunities. In some cases, they didn't think it was a good thing. And all of a sudden now it's an important thing, and it provides leverage for the association with the franchisor as you go through these things. The issue opportunity register is a great place to put these sort of things so it can be brought up regularly and shared with all of the franchisees because they need to know. And also, we need to have it open. We need to have it changeable because if we need to do something else and we need to shift and move, we want everyone involved. And also, it helps with bringing in new members and keeping everyone thinking on the same line of thought. So it comes up multiple points with the franchisor, and they understand that we are an organized group. Some of the other things about sharing amongst ourselves, this has been one of the best things I've seen come out of our association, besides getting rid of the global guy. But things like best practice calls were mentioned earlier. We wanted to start these after we had formed. We were about 4 or 5 months into it. I reached out to Griswold because they hold the best practice calls. We had 2 different ones going at one time. We're looking to start some other ones as well. 9 Round is running them. It's a chance to share all those different practices because a lot of times we don't talk to each other. And we end up in our little silos. So this is a great way to keep sharing across. Also, we've had some internal disputes between franchisees, some trying to take advantage of others, and it provides that common voice so we can sort it out and get it done right. And we didn't have to involve the franchisor in our own little battles. It also provides opportunities to mentor new franchisees. You can set that kind of structure up. But also supply agreements. I know there are some from the Aafd regarding insurance. You have Ring Central and those sort of things. Those are group agreements that everyone can take advantage of. But also it's about sharing those types of agreements that maybe have been set up internally for our insurance, for our professional insurance. One of our consultants had found a brokerage that had a very good rated insurance company and was able to cut most of our insurance costs by 1/3. Well, we shared that all around because we have the association to do that and share with everyone. And the most important thing is it's all about negotiated improvement.
Excuse me, JD.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, it's Amy. I don't mean to interrupt you, and I hate to do this, but we are going to have to cut this session short because our senator is waiting to launch our next session in 3 minutes.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we had technical issues which delayed us. And but I'm going to invite Bob to come on, and he might have a few words. I think we're going to try to revisit this conversation in a little bit.
No, that's fine. I was actually just wrapping up. I was
Okay, thank you.
Biography for Jonathan, so it's probably a good.
Yes, because we do have Jonathan Fortman that has some additional great information.
Am I live? Am I live yet?
You're live, Bob.
So yeah, and JD, I'm really sorry, and everybody. We had, as you know, we had a technical glitch out of the starting gates. This is a very important session, and we're going to continue. And JD, if you didn't finish, but we need to give everybody a couple minute break because we've got a lot of work to do. We're going to ask the senator to hopefully delay 2 or 3 minutes, so we can give everybody 5 minutes now. After the senator is done, we're going to come back and we're going to finish the session. John, your work is not going to be lost. We may have to boot Zoe to a primetime special of her own. so we can get back on schedule. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit, because we finished this session continues after the senator speaks with our roundtables. We're only halfway through, if you think about it, because the roundtables are really to address some of the things that we've discussed today. So I want to, 10 minutes behind schedule, we're going to have a break for 5 minutes. Amy, tell us what we do to come back on. I think we go to a different studio or something for the senator. I don't know if Amy's able to come back in or not. But we're gonna break now. Everybody, go get a glass of water or something stronger if you need it. To take your bathroom breaks, and we're going to be back here at 9:45. It's just 5 minutes late and we have a great opportunity here from Senator Cortez Masto. Very excited about that. And then we will come back to this session immediately following that, and we'll hear from Jonathan Fortman and possibly from Zoe Chapin. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, Amy, you are muted. We're not hearing you.